On a freezing December night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., Kevin Hamilton stepped out of the Palisades Hotel and into a trap he never saw coming. Inside, executives toasted under chandeliers, unaware or perhaps unwilling to see the storm gathering outside. Kevin carried secrets that could expose a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud, but those secrets made him dangerous to people who would do anything to silence him. Within just 13 minutes, phone calls were made, cars were in motion, and lives were about to collide in a way that would end in blood. This wasn't a random act. It was planned, calculated, and executed by the very people Kevin once trusted. This is the story of betrayal at the highest levels, a cover-up that lasted years and the night a whistleblower walked into the dark and never returned. The night was cold, the kind of December chill that cuts through even the thickest coats. Inside the Palisades Hotel, warm lights glowed, music floated through the air, and glasses clinked as executives and employees celebrated at the company's annual holiday gala. Laughter echoed in the ballroom, but beneath the polished surface something dark was already unfolding. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Kevin Hamilton pushed through the hotel's glass doors and stepped outside. He buttoned his coat, unaware that this ordinary action would mark the last time anyone would see him alive. He wasn't running and he wasn't hiding, but people inside that building were already watching his every move. For months, Kevin had been quietly gathering evidence. As a senior finance manager, he discovered irregularities buried deep within company records. What began as a few suspicious transactions turned into the uncovering of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that reached the highest levels of mountain wing aviation. Kevin was a man who believed in doing the right thing, even when it was dangerous. And now that belief had put a target on his back. Jennifer Costa, a powerful executive at the company, had realized that Kevin knew too much. Earlier that evening, while guests enjoyed dinner and speeches, Costa had pulled Thomas Becker, the head of security, aside. In a quiet corner, away from the crowd, she gave him a clear instruction: watch Kevin, follow his movements through the hotel's security system. Let her know the moment he left. Becker didn't argue. For years he had been on the company's secret payroll, taking money to ignore breaches, delete camera footage, and keep quiet. He had crossed too many lines to back out now, so when Kevin stepped through the lobby doors, Becker was ready. Sitting in the security room, he watched the cameras carefully. A notification was sent to Costa almost immediately. Upstairs, Costa's phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and felt a wave of urgency. She knew Kevin was dangerous, not because of who he was, but because of what he knew. The documents in his possession could expose everything: the fake invoices, the shell companies, and the financial trail leading straight to her. If he went to authorities, her career, her wealth, and her carefully constructed image would all collapse. Meanwhile, Kevin walked out into the cold night, his breath visible in the frosty air. Maybe he needed a moment of quiet after the noise of the gala. Maybe he was heading to his car to clear his head. He had been under incredible stress in recent weeks. Friends later said he seemed distracted at work, sometimes glancing over his shoulder like he sensed something was wrong. He'd confided in only a few trusted people, expressing fear that someone inside the company had found out about his investigation. Back inside, Costa made a quick decision. She slipped away from the event with practiced ease, telling a colleague she needed some air. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing more than a short break from the festivities, but in reality she was stepping into a carefully set plan, one designed to make sure Kevin Hamilton never had the chance to speak to investigators. Becker continued to monitor the cameras, his heart pounding faster than he wanted to admit. He knew this wasn't just about fraud anymore. Whatever Costa was planning, it was serious. Yet he stayed silent, trapped by his own history of corruption. As Kevin walked toward the parking area, unaware of the silent alerts, Costa was already following at a distance. She moved quickly but discreetly, making sure no one noticed her leaving behind him. She wasn't alone anymore. The machinery of a conspiracy had already begun to turn. In those final minutes, the pieces were falling into place. Kevin, the whistleblower who believed in justice. Costa, the executive desperate to protect herself. Becker, the corrupt guard watching it all happen. None of them could have imagined how the next hour would change their lives forever. At 11:47 p.m., Kevin Hamilton walked out into the night with hope, fear, and a file of dangerous secrets. And behind him, a chain of decisions was set in motion. Decisions that would lead not to negotiations, but to betrayal, violence, and tragedy. The wind picked up as Kevin Hamilton crossed the street near the Palisades Hotel. It was just past midnight. The city was quiet, only the distant hum of traffic and the crunch of snow beneath his shoes broke the silence. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another man heading to his car after a long night, but unseen eyes were following him. Inside the hotel, Thomas Becker sat in front of the glowing security monitors. His fingers hovered over the controls, his eyes fixed on the grainy black and white footage of Kevin. He zoomed in slightly, watching him walk through the parking area. His phone vibrated on the desk, a message from Jennifer Costa. It was short and direct. "Where is he now?" Becker's throat felt dry. He typed back, "Heading toward the Bow River lot, just left the main entrance." He pressed send and leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just another routine favor. He knew Costa well enough to sense the weight behind her instructions. She wasn't just curious, she was preparing for something. Outside, Jennifer Costa was already moving. She had slipped away from the gala quietly, telling a coworker she needed some fresh air. Her elegant coat was buttoned tightly, her heels clicking softly on the pavement as she walked through the side exit. She didn't want anyone to notice her leaving right after Kevin. If questions came later, she needed her movements to look ordinary. But nothing about this night was ordinary. Costa's mind raced as she walked. Kevin Hamilton had become a serious threat. She had tried to talk to him once before, trying to keep things friendly, offering him promotions, money, a chance to be on the winning side. But Kevin wasn't the kind of man who could be bought. He had made it clear he was planning to hand everything over to the authorities. She couldn't let that happen. She pulled out her phone and made a brief, tense call to Derek Walsh, an ally she had relied on in the past. He was someone who had benefited from the fraudulent operations and had his own reasons to keep Kevin silent. The call lasted less than a minute. Walsh didn't ask many questions. He just listened and agreed to meet her. While this was happening, Kevin reached the edge of the Bow River parking area. The lights were dim, the snow on the ground reflecting a pale glow. He was deep in thought, unaware that messages and phone calls were already being exchanged about him. Back at the security room, Becker wiped his palms on his pants. His conscience nagged at him, but his fear was stronger. Years of taking money, deleting evidence, and looking the other way had left him with no way out. If he refused Costa now, she could expose everything. And if he went to the police, he'd go down with her. So he stayed silent, watching, tracking, and waiting. Costa arrived at the parking lot a few minutes later. She spotted Kevin standing alone near his car. For a brief moment, she considered turning around, driving away, pretending this wasn't happening. But then the image of her entire empire collapsing flashed through her mind. The fraud, the shell companies, the years of manipulation and control. If Kevin spoke, everything would end. She straightened her coat and walked toward him. Kevin turned when he heard footsteps. His expression shifted from surprise to cautious concern. He hadn't expected to see her here, away from the gala. In the cold night, Costa forced a calm smile, masking the tension that coiled inside her. Their conversation started quietly. She spoke about misunderstandings, loyalty, and trust. Kevin listened, but his guard was up. He had already made his choice. He wasn't going to be bought or silenced. His answers were firm. Costa's smile faded. The friendly tone vanished, replaced by something sharper. In that moment, the trap was fully set. Costa had Kevin alone, away from witnesses, away from security cameras that could see clearly. She had Becker watching from a distance, and Walsh on his way. Kevin didn't know it yet, but every step he had taken since leaving the hotel had been watched. Every move had pushed him closer to a moment that would change everything. Becker sat in his car nearby, engine off, watching the scene from a distance. His stomach twisted as he saw Costa and Kevin standing face to face. The confrontation had begun, and now there was no easy way out for any of them. The parking area near the Bow River was almost silent. The cold night air was sharp, and the faint sound of the river in the distance only made the stillness feel heavier. Under the weak yellow light of a few street lamps, Kevin Hamilton and Jennifer Costa stood facing each other. What started as a calm conversation was quickly becoming tense. Kevin's voice was firm but controlled. He had tried to stay professional, even in this strange late-night meeting. Costa spoke with an icy calmness, trying to sound reasonable. She talked about loyalty, reputation, and doing what's best for everyone. She hinted at promotions, financial rewards, and opportunities if Kevin chose to handle things internally. But Kevin didn't waver. For weeks, he had carried the weight of the truth on his shoulders. He had seen the evidence: fraudulent payments, shell companies, missing funds. He knew exactly what Costa and her circle were doing, and he had already decided he wasn't going to be silent. He told her clearly that he planned to take everything to the authorities in the morning. That single statement changed the entire atmosphere. Costa's calm mask cracked. Her voice sharpened. Her words became colder, more threatening. She reminded Kevin of his position in the company, the consequences he might face, and how dangerous it could be to turn on powerful people. Kevin didn't back down. He told her plainly that right was right, and that he wouldn't be part of the fraud. For the first time that night, Costa didn't know how to control the situation with words. She felt cornered. And then headlights appeared in the distance. Derek Walsh arrived in his BMW, pulling into the lot quickly but quietly. He parked a short distance away and stepped out, wearing dark clothes, his breath misting in the cold. He had been called there by Costa only minutes earlier. He didn't know every detail of the situation, but he understood enough. Kevin was a threat and Costa wanted backup. When Kevin saw Walsh approaching, his expression shifted. Confusion, then concern. "What's he doing here?" Kevin asked. Costa didn't answer. Walsh walked toward them with tense energy. He wasn't a man used to negotiations. He was used to taking action. He had a metal pipe hidden inside his jacket, taken earlier that day from a maintenance area. He had brought it as a show of force, not necessarily to use it, but deep down he was nervous. He didn't want to lose everything because of one man's whistleblowing. As Walsh joined them, the argument heated up. Kevin and Walsh exchanged sharp words. Kevin told them both that the fraud was over, that he wouldn't be intimidated, that by tomorrow morning the truth would be out. Walsh's face hardened. Costa stood slightly behind, silent now, watching the confrontation unfold. Kevin turned to leave. He had said what he needed to say. But in that moment, Walsh snapped. Whether it was panic, rage, or fear of losing everything, something inside him broke. Without warning, Walsh swung the metal pipe. It struck Kevin from behind, a heavy, sickening blow that echoed in the quiet night. Kevin collapsed instantly onto the snow-covered pavement. Walsh didn't stop. He struck him again, and then again. Each hit was fueled by fear more than thought. Costa stood frozen, her eyes wide, unable to look away. She hadn't told Walsh to kill him, not in clear words, but she also hadn't stopped him. Nearby, Thomas Becker watched from his car. He had followed Costa's instructions to stay close but not be seen. Now he saw everything. The sudden violence, the blood spreading dark against the snow, the moment everything crossed a line that could never be undone. His heart pounded as he gripped the steering wheel, realizing that he was now part of something far more serious than fraud. Walsh finally stepped back, breathing hard, staring down at Kevin's motionless body. The reality of what he'd done hit him like a wave. Costa slowly approached, her face pale, her voice trembling as she told Becker to get out of his car. She needed his help. In just a few minutes, a heated argument had turned into murder. A man who had once trusted his colleagues lay lifeless on the cold ground, and three people who had once worked under the same roof were now bound together by a violent crime. The trap was no longer just a plan. It was blood on the pavement. The parking lot had gone silent after the attack. The only sounds were the faint wind and the distant rush of the river. Kevin Hamilton lay still on the cold pavement, his blood darkening the thin layer of snow beneath him. The night that had started with lights, music, and celebration had turned into a scene of panic, fear, and irreversible choices. Derek Walsh stepped back, breathing heavily, staring down at what he had done. His hands trembled. Just minutes earlier, he'd believed this would be a quick, intimidating conversation, nothing more. Now Kevin wasn't moving. The metal pipe he'd used lay on the ground beside him. The weight of reality hit Walsh like a brick. There was no going back. Jennifer Costa stood frozen for a few seconds. Her mind raced in chaos. This wasn't what she had planned, at least not in this way. She had wanted to control the situation, not watch it spin into violence. But instead of calling the police or trying to undo what had happened, she made a choice. A cold, calculated choice. She would cover it up. She turned sharply toward Thomas Becker, who was still sitting in his car a short distance away. Becker had seen everything. His heart pounded in his chest as Costa motioned for him to come over. He didn't want to move, but he knew he had no real choice. He had been part of their corruption for years. If this came out, his own crimes would surface too. Costasip's voice was low but firm. "Get out. We need to fix this." Becker stepped out slowly, his breath clouding in the freezing air. When he reached them, the full sight of Kevin's body made his stomach twist. He had dealt with shady security favors before, but never something like this. Costa spoke quickly, her tone suddenly steady. She told Walsh to put Kevin's body in the trunk of his car. Walsh hesitated for a moment, still in shock, but Costa's sharp stare pushed him into action. Together, Walsh and Becker lifted Kevin's body. It was heavier than either expected, and their hands slipped in the cold, but they managed to place him into the trunk of Walsh's BMW. Costa wiped her hands on her coat, trying to keep her breathing under control. She looked at Becker. "You're coming with him," she ordered. Walsh would drive the body to a Mountain View storage facility, a place the company used for maintenance equipment. Becker was to follow in his own car. Costa, meanwhile, would return to the hotel to make sure her alibi stayed intact. She checked her watch. It was close to midnight. If she returned to the gala quickly, no one would question her absence. She fixed her hair in the reflection of her car window, steadied her expression, and walked briskly back toward the hotel. On the outside, she would appear calm and composed. On the inside, she was locking away any trace of panic. Back at the Palisades Hotel, cameras recorded her walking in through the lobby at exactly 12 a.m. She smiled faintly at a coworker as if nothing had happened. To anyone watching, it looked like she had stepped out for a quick smoke break. Meanwhile, Walsh drove through the quiet streets with Kevin's body in his trunk. Becker followed close behind. Neither spoke on the phone. The weight of silence was heavy. At the storage facility, Walsh pulled into a secluded area. Together, he and Becker carried Kevin's body inside and sealed it in a large industrial drum, normally used for maintenance waste. The sound of the lid being locked down echoed in the empty building. Becker wanted to throw up. His hands were shaking. He wasn't a killer, but he was now part of a murder. He knew it, and Costa knew it too. After finishing, Walsh and Becker closed up the facility and drove off in separate directions. Becker went home, sick and terrified. He barely slept, replaying the events in his mind over and over again, realizing that his life had changed in a single night. Costa returned to the gala, greeted a few guests, and blended back into the crowd as if nothing unusual had happened. No one noticed that beneath her calm exterior, she was already planning how to erase the traces of what they had done. In just a few short hours, 3 people had gone from colleagues to conspirators. What had begun as corporate corruption had escalated into a violent crime, and now a carefully crafted cover-up was underway. The parking lot had been emptied, the trunk was cleaned, and Kevin Hamilton, a man who only wanted to do the right thing, had been hidden away in silence. For years, Kevin Hamilton's disappearance remained a mystery. At first, there were searches, posters, and desperate pleas from his family. His wife visited the police station almost every week, holding on to hope that Kevin might be alive somewhere. She replayed their last conversation over and over again in her mind, the way he'd told her not to wait up, that he'd be home late but safe. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and eventually the world moved on. The company released polite statements, co-workers gave vague interviews, and police followed dead-end leads. But Kevin's family never gave up. His parents aged faster with worry. His younger brother made it his life's mission to keep the case alive, and quietly a small team of investigators kept digging. The truth began to unravel slowly, like threads being pulled from a tightly woven fabric. A few years after the disappearance, Thomas Becker, the security officer who had followed Kevin that night, began to break under the weight of guilt. He was never a violent man, and what happened that night haunted him every single day. He couldn't look at himself in the mirror without remembering Kevin's lifeless eyes in the cold parking lot. He drank heavily. He avoided people. And then, one night after another sleepless evening, Becker finally told his wife the truth. He confessed everything: the tracking, the confrontation, the cover-up. At first she didn't believe him, but when he gave her details that only someone involved could know, she urged him to go to the authorities. It took him months to gather the courage, but eventually he reached out to a retired detective who had worked Kevin's case. That detective, who had never been convinced by the random disappearance theory, helped guide Becker through the process. When Becker sat down in that interview room, he cried before he even started talking. For the first time in years, the silence was broken. Becker's statement led investigators to re-examine evidence they had previously overlooked. Surveillance footage was enhanced. Phone records were reanalyzed. The timeline of Kevin's last known movements was rebuilt piece by piece. And finally, one clue led them to the Mountain View storage facility. Inside, forensic teams uncovered a sealed industrial drum. When they opened it, the truth Kevin's family had feared but needed to know came out. After years of uncertainty, Kevin Hamilton's remains were finally found. The news shattered his family, but it also ignited a wave of determination. Authorities moved quickly. Jennifer Costa, who had climbed even higher in the corporate ranks, was arrested at her office in a dramatic scene that shook the company. She tried to maintain her composure, but evidence, including Becker's testimony, Walsh's phone records, and newly uncovered documents, left no room to escape. Derek Walsh, who had tried to bury his guilt under arrogance and distance, was confronted with the evidence and eventually confessed as well. He admitted to striking Kevin but blamed Costa for orchestrating everything. Their alliance crumbled the moment they were caught. Each tried to save themselves, but their own words only tightened the noose. The trial in 2025 was intense. Kevin's family sat in the front row every single day, holding each other tightly as they listened to every detail. The prosecution laid out the conspiracy clearly: Costa's fear of exposure, Walsh's violence, Becker's reluctant role, and the cover-up that followed. The verdict came after weeks of testimony. Jennifer Costa and Derek Walsh were found guilty of murder and conspiracy, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Becker, who had come forward voluntarily and helped solve the case, received a reduced sentence for his role but testified with brutal honesty. When the judge read the verdict, Kevin's family wept openly. It didn't bring him back, but for the first time in years there was truth, and with truth came a measure of peace. Kevin Hamilton's story became a symbol of justice through perseverance. Media outlets covered the case widely. Investigators spoke about how persistence, advancements in forensic technology, and one man's confession had finally broken through years of silence. The Palisades Hotel case wasn't just about corporate greed or a murder hidden in the dark. It was about the human cost of silence and how one night of betrayal changed countless lives. Kevin's family set up a foundation in his name to support whistleblowers and missing persons cases, determined to make sure that no one else would be forgotten the way Kevin nearly was. In the end, the conspiracy that once seemed unbreakable was brought down by truth, courage, and time, and Kevin Hamilton, once a lone whistleblower, was finally given the justice he deserved. Kevin Hamilton's story isn't just about fraud, betrayal, and murder. It's about how one man's courage to speak the truth shook powerful people to their core. For years, those involved believed they had covered their tracks. They destroyed evidence, silenced witnesses, and carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Piece by piece, testimony by testimony, the web of lies unraveled. Behind every legal document and courtroom scene were real people: a wife who refused to give up, children who grew up without answers, and investigators who carried the weight of the case long after others had moved on. Justice didn't come quickly. It came through years of persistence, heartbreak, and the determination of those who refused to let Kevin's story fade away. Stories like this remind us how dangerous silence can be and how powerful the truth becomes when it finally breaks through. If you want more real stories that reveal the hidden side of crime, justice, and human resilience, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Share this story to keep Kevin Hamilton's voice alive and to support bringing more untold cases into the light. Your support makes a real difference in uncovering the truth behind the headlines.